Welcome, everyone, to Wizards and Warp Drives, our first podcast for 2025. Welcome back, everyone. So, obviously, this is the podcast where three grown-ass men get deeply nerdy about the shit they love. My name's Nacho. And joining me is Fred from How to RPG and the mighty glue stick himself, Mr. AJ Pickett.
How's it going, everybody?
Yeah, I'm always keen to talk about shit. But what we're talking about today is far from shit.
Yeah, it's far from shit.
It's far from shit. Yeah.
Well, it's the good shit that we're talking about today.
Yeah, it is the good shit. It really is.
Yeah. So today we're going to dive into a little tabletop role-playing game that basically took the world by storm last year and has got a few of us old fellas a bit excited, and that is ShadowDark.
Essentially, you're about to listen to an hours-long advertising promotion for ShadowDark from three people who are very enthusiastic about it.
I'm gonna correct you. 2 hours.
2 hours? 2 hours, okay.
2 hours.
Here we go. Strap in.
Yeah, strap in, baby.
We're getting into the weeds. All right. So yeah, ShadowDark is a tabletop RPG that was created by Kelsey Dion from the Arcane Library. She published it in 2023 after a highly successful Kickstarter campaign, which raised $1.4 million. It is part of the OSR, or the Old School Renaissance. It is very much emphasizing on the nostalgia of classic tabletop RPGs while using modernized mechanics. Yeah, so she's obviously a very talented lady. She has published a lot of stuff for 5e in the past, some really good adventures in that. And she has been playing tabletop role-playing games since she was a kid. Her dad was an old school Dungeons and Dragons player, and she kind of just inherited it as a love from her family. And yeah, it's obviously something that she cares about. So before we get into the game style mechanics, one thing really has stood out to me just from looking at this book is the art.
Yeah, it's got a particular vibe to it, which is dungeon crawl.
It's also the artwork, the original artwork from the very, very early fighting fantasy books.
Yeah, that's where I got the vibe.
It's got
fighting
that vibe.
fantasy.
Yep.
It's got that vibe of being dangerous, horrific, and otherworldly. And
it's black and white straight away, and it's hand drawn, and it's just gritty and immersive.
Stark contrast, bold designs that really leap out of the page. Sort of a like the fighting fantasy novels, like Warlock of Fire type Mountain, that sort of thing, and early fighting fantasy and the D&D basic set. Sort of not the D&D basic set, but like the early modules and adventures like Errol Otis art and stuff like that. If it was black and white and sort of creepy crawlies and gritty.
And if Errol Otis's stuff was a bit more horrific, because that was a bit more comical. This is not comical. This takes the subject matter quite seriously, and it's obvious just from the cover. We're dealing with a creature that looks like a beholder with a great huge mouth, which has essentially some sort of central two eyes, rather than a central eye, but something going on in the center there. A whole lot of eye stalky things with eyeballs coming off it, and it's called an annihilator.
Right.
Yeah, so badass.
So Kelsey decided that the concept copyright on the beholder can't call it a beholder. So her beholder is called an annihilator. I mean, seriously, if you could make a beholder scarier, she's done it. Because this beholder is going to make you shit bricks. It really is.
It's got a Dalek vibe to that name.
One of the things that like the beholder lore has sort of embraced is that every beholder is different. They're all mutants. And you look at the original artwork of the beholder, it's basically a ball with some like weedy little eye stalks coming off it. It doesn't look that impressive, but that definitely looks impressive. It looks like a mutant disease horror that's probably boiling with like diseases and infections frothing off it and otherworldly you know,
Yeah.
it looks like touching it is gonna irradiate you and infect you.
Yeah.
I've got a miniature of the original Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Beholder that I got. Like I bought a classic box set of all the original miniatures, and when I put it on my table, my players laughed at it.
Yeah. Like, what's that?
Yeah.
This reminds me of the Twilight Zone. This monster reminds me of the Twilight Zone and Stranger Things and a lot of the old sort of yeah. It reminds me a whole lot of the really older sort of science fiction horror to a certain degree, even though it's not science fiction that we're dealing with here. We're dealing with fantasy. The thing to bear in mind is that Kelsey, even though she's quite young, she grew up around playing with and game mastering with the old guard. So the original people who play tested what became D&D. So that's her roots.
Yeah.
Those are the people that she hung out with a lot. And so we it's not that she and she apparently did have some connections to Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson and some of the other people that were involved in the early development of D&D. So she knows quite a bit about that sort of stuff.
So she comes from a fine pedigree.
Yeah, she used to go to Gen Con and stuff with her parents, and she's even old school in some of her old adventures. So I've actually read a few of her adventures and played a couple of her adventures before she went to ShadowDark, and they were based on Edgar Allan Poe. Like she used that as inspiration for her adventures, which, I mean, that's going way, way back, So she's obviously got a very old soul to her, and really likes that sort of gothic horror as well. I was having a look who the artists were, and there was quite a number of artists that worked in the book. Some guy called Lucas Court. I'm probably going to butcher these names. I do apologize. And Yuri Hergowski D'Amico are the main two guys that contributed most of the art to the books. And I was having a look at these guys' Facebook's page, and that Lucas Court, he was doing some really cool art based on like movies like John Carpenter's The Thing, just hand drawn stuff. So they've got this really sort of style of disgusting monsters, which really captures it, and it does feel. I think that I do like the original basic D&D art, but Larry Elmore's stuff was quite clean and quite sort of nice looking, whereas this is more that gritty 2000 AD Final Fantasy sort of like vibe.
It does have a 2000 AD vibe here, like Slain and Slain was well, you can't really separate it from Simon Bisley, but it had that sort of gritty, dirty sort of organic. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get into the should we get into the gameplay? Or sorry, you got something
absolutely.
else? Okay. So ShadowDark RPG emphasizes simplicity, speed, and danger in a dark fantasy setting. It focuses on quick decision making and problem solving. The core mechanics revolve around dice rolling and managing stats to navigate challenges. So, how do you want to do it? Do you want to break down, like, go through character creation?
Well, I think there's some initial things we need to discuss about this, because there's a quick start or quick starter PDF, which is just a really short, free to download set of rules. And you can play the game with this because it's got monsters, it's got how to build your character. It doesn't have all the monsters. You get a lot more monsters if you buy the actual full book, but the free PDF is a really good start.
Has an adventure as well.
It does. It's designed to ensure that people can get started into this as quickly as possible.
It's very much like the red box set of basic.
It is.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say this now, and the rest of this discussion that we have is going to probably be trying to convince you, if you're listening or bothered to listen, that I think Dungeons and Dragons, the best version of Dungeons and Dragons, is in ShadowDark right now. Even BECME. I've played BECME. I haven't played AD&D first edition or second edition because still can't understand it. I'm 53 years old and I still can't understand that damn game.
You can't read it. It's the font size. That's the problem.
Well, I mean, that's part of the problem, but not the only problem. And then, but I mean, I've got the book. It's the first game system I purchased, the first version of D&D I purchased, but I never understood how to play it.
Yeah.
And I played 3.5, 4E, 5E. I haven't played original, but I have read through the original book, and you have to go and you have to get hold of chainmail to be able to do the combat side because all the rules of combat are not actually in the original book.
Frank Mentor has been quoted as saying that he didn't understand AD&D when the original Dungeons and Dragons, when he first read it, he had to see it in play to understand what was going on.
Yeah.
That was the mindset of a lot of wargamers back then. But the thing to keep in mind is that D&D was invented and presented to wargamers. So they used the lexicon and the understanding of wargaming as a launch pad for fantasy individual play.
Yeah.
And ever since then, we've basically been simplifying the presentation and trying to streamline and smooth it out and stuff, and assume that the people who are playing the games are not wargamers. They're coming into the hobby fresh, and that's what Kelsey has done. She said, okay, if you don't understand what's going on, here's an example in the book.
There's also there's a difference between like the original basic version of Dungeons and Dragons and Mentz's version of Dungeons and Dragons as well. Yeah, he really simplified that rule set. Again.
Yeah, well, he's one of the authors of the D&D Basic, but his Immortal rules, again, most people when they read the Immortal rules don't understand it, so that's kind of funny.
Yeah. So the core book is everything. So if you buy the actual book, not the Quick Start PDF, and you can get the Quick Start PDF off the Arcane Library or the Drive-Through RPG websites. I think those are the two key places you can get it from, free.
Mm-hmm.
But the core book, the actual physical book itself, whether it's in PDF or hard copy, which is, I don't know if you noticed, but the hard copy version, the PDF hasn't been going up in price, but the hard copy has been going up in price. So this is basically an indie game that is not having to do what everybody else does, which is continually drop their price to entice people to buy the thing. It keeps selling out. I've got a copy. Much to my surprise, I got one just before the end of the year. AJ is still waiting for his.
I just jumped on the website today and it said, next batch is due in February. Order now to not miss out.
Yeah, so a lot of people are not. There's a backlog of people who want this physical book, not just the PDF. So there's a high demand, and I believe the price will continue to go up because it is that good. That is a good sign for a system. The core book has everything. It is a player's handbook, it is a monster manual, and it is a dungeon master guide. And it's about 330 pages, roughly, somewhere in that vicinity, which is quite a feat. And this is a compact book. It's digest size. It's literally not A4 size. 325 pages.
It's Bible size.
Yeah, it's Bible size. That's right.
Yeah. And you can see how to basically your dungeon master screen is set up on the inside cover. So the actual cover has got weapons and armor and how to build a character, dying, morale, difficulty classes. You've got on another page names for NPCs, ancestries. There's a whole bunch of stuff here. How to figure out treasure, what the stat modifiers represent in terms of stat skills or ability scores, languages. It's basically designed so that a lot of the stuff that you might need or reference constantly is going to be there and accessible fast, which is impressive.
Just like as an experienced dungeon master, as we all are, just the fact that there's an NPC name generator right at the front there is a testament to the fact that Kelsey has made this for people who play. Like, she has played a lot and she knows what people need in the front there, because too often it's like encumbrance and costs of items and things like that. Like, you don't really need to reference those on the fly, but you need an NPC name straight away. It's right at the front of the book.
Yeah.
right there.
Something I thought of the other day, not to go slightly off topic, I thought of I'd really like in the new monster manual, which is never ever included, is monster loot tables.
Mm.
Because the amount of time my players go want to loot a monster, I was like, why don't they put just something in the back of the monster manual just telling me like a bunch of loot tables? That would be so cool.
Yeah.
Well, you've got that. You've got that in this.
Uh, I just want to give a shout out to the layout of the book.
Mm.
Yeah, it's 300 pages, but it's. I haven't read the full book. Obviously, I read the quick start rules, and it's the first time I was just saying to the guys before we started. It's the first time I've sat down and just digested a full rule set in an hour,
Yeah.
and not felt overwhelmed and gone, I could run this. It was so easy to read, and its layout. It's just the way the pages aren't like walls of text.
Mm.
They're just. She's used the most minimum amount of words, but they're very effective, and you're not having to read it twice to like with a lot of D&D rules. I'm not having to, kind of read it and then I had this the other day because I'm playing with a group of new players and we're playing D&D, and even though we're looking up rules and they're asking me about their certain spells and stuff, there's still like 5 or 10 minutes of like back and forth of what does that mean, and we're working it out, and I'm trying to translate what that means, whereas this plain English is what I'd describe it as. Simplified plain English that anyone from any experience level could quickly understand.
Yeah, like one of the complaints I have with, and it's a minor complaint, it's just a personal gripe, with Morkborg, for instance, or with some books that don't have like like an index and a glossary, or the thing at the back, is sometimes the design is too funky. It gets in the way. Like with Morkborg, it's hard to find things for me. It's too chaotic. The colors are jarring. I understand that after a while, after you're familiar with the book, that would be easy to navigate because you could flip through, and if the pages are distinct designs, you could pop onto one. It's like, oh, I know that this pink garish one is where the something is located, but that doesn't help when you're first reading a book. Kelsey's book is very approachable, and it's one of those books which I know I would put like those little sticker note thingies in for quick reference.
Yeah.
I'd absolutely do that. Yeah. And of course, just having everything in one book is so handy.
When someone, like you said, like someone that is experienced at playing and running tabletop RPGs makes a book without a committee interfering.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
So there's a couple of other things to mention too, and that is that the core book is designed to be used. It's actually got page references in it. So if you are designing your character, all the information, the layout, the step-by-step process is on one page, and then it refers you to which page you need to go if you need to go somewhere else to get information. But it often does this with other things as well, which is really helpful. This is something that I don't see in other books. I don't see it in Wizards of the Coast. I didn't see it in Morkborg. I haven't seen it in anything. It's very rare to see a rule system actually page reference where to go to look for information when you need it.
Yeah.
It gives you a ribbon bookmark, so you can bookmark where you're going, so you don't have to have a little cardboard one. And it has a solid contents page. They're all really well done. Unfortunately, it does not have an index, which is really strange. I think maybe the part of the reason is that maybe Kelsey was running into a page count problem, or maybe decided that the book itself was simple enough that you wouldn't need to actually have an index for specific information. But I actually have found is a problem. So if I need to look up, where do I go to find out what I roll for my damage dice? It's actually not that easy. It's in the combat section, but the combat section is still a couple of pages long. Not as long as some other systems, but it's not that easy to actually find exactly what you want really, really quickly if you need to. And this is one of the problems with the book. But other than that, it's actually done a really good job. That would be one of my complaints. And I see a lot of people saying that ShadowDark as an RPG or tabletop role-playing game is just a dungeon crawl tabletop game. but it's not. It's certainly designed around that concept, but you can apply it to wilderness exploration. I have applied it to wilderness exploration, and it worked fine. It worked fine. And it can also deal with a narrative fantasy situation. So I don't think that it's pigeonholed into just being old school crawling through a dungeon. That might be...
It does that very well,
yeah,
but it's not limited.
No.
Yeah.
No, it's certainly not.
All right. Should we go into character creation?
I've got a couple other things I want to say, because do you guys realize how many Ennies this thing won?
Oh, yeah. It cleaned up. It cleaned up that year.
It cleaned up. Best product.
4? Was it 4?
4 of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't remember. There might be best layout and something, and the other best product, best I think best layout, and the other two were not. She nabbed the top awards in 2000 and was it 24 or 23?
24, I believe. Yeah,
24. Right now, that's a big deal for the Ennie Awards, but maybe not as impressive, because how the Ennie Awards are actually voted on is somewhat dodgy.
Well, we should point out what the Ennies are. So that comes from N-World. N-World, also known as Morris's unofficial tabletop news, is a British-owned tabletop role-playing game news and reviews website, and they have an Ennie Awards that they stage every year, which is an industry-coveted award, which is just grown by reputation.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a nerdy award show for role-playing games.
It's like the Time Magazine Award of the Year sort of thing.
Yeah. It's our Academy Awards.
It's our Academy Awards, yeah, essentially. Except we don't get to vote on it. It's purely the N-World's criteria, whatever they are.
Well, that's not true. You do vote on it.
I don't vote on it.
but yeah, there is an option. That every year they put out a link to vote, and usually it comes down to
because I was asked to vote for a few. Because I know Jason Alexander's book was up as well.
Yeah. Because usually what happens is the creator of whatever game has been nominated then goes into the process of trying to promote their product, and whoever's got the biggest reach winds up winning.
Yep.
But of course, this time round, that might have happened again. But I do feel like there's definitely, unlike Morkbook, who won a bunch of awards for shit that I don't understand. I like the game system, but getting an Ennie award for layout is bullshit. It's a pretty book, it's an art book, but layout is shit, and it got an award for that. But I feel like it's legitimately got awards that it should have won this time around in ShadowDark.
Yeah.
I found when I was putting this forward, it's actually really easy. It was really easy for me to pick up because I'd played so many different versions of D&D. Having played BECME and 5E, that helps. I also was looking at this book and I was thinking, as a new game master or a dungeon master, will you actually find ShadowDark easy to navigate? And probably not if you're completely new to tabletop role-playing games and fantasy, because it does assume that you know something about Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop role-playing games.
Mm-hmm.
And the argument has been, well, because of that, and because there's a lot that is not said in the book, then it's not a good system. But then I thought about this. In the long term, if I was starting out with this system, or I was starting out with D&D 5e, what would my route look like? And I think my route would be less problematic and treacherous if I was dealing with ShadowDark than modern D&D. Even with the fact that they've got 3 sorting books, and this is 1 book. And even with the new Dungeon Master Guide, I still feel like I think the journey would be a lot easier for a new Dungeon Master.
Yeah, but there is a modern twist to this. So because it's just Kelsey that is running this game, so there's 2 things she has incorporated that I think that you haven't really taken, like this. There's SoloDark, so she has built in a mechanic for you to be able to play it by yourself, and she has also done her own like YouTube tutorials on how to run the game and how to play the game. So, and that's just, that's a modern way of approaching that. Obviously, we never had with BackMe or anything like that. We had the solo thing, but we didn't have the creator sitting down doing little tutorial videos. And they're not like I know Wizards of the Coast have done these, but those Wizards of the Coast ones just feel like they've just got some sort of like model off it's an actor or something, and it's just so false. It's like an infomercial more than a actual tutorial, and it's kind of cringy watching it.
Yeah.
So
Dragonbane's got much better instructional videos. They're entertaining to watch.
There's also been another thing that I've seen people put out and say that, because ShadowDark only goes from level 1 to level 10, and most people are only playing from level 1 to level 10, that it's a dumbed down version of D&D and only suitable for one-shots. And I'm sorry, but I don't agree, because, people have been running this for a year or more, and they have been running campaigns with no issues. I've started a campaign. We're starting at zero level, going all the way to level 10, and we're only up to level 1 because I've only just started. But I don't foresee there being a problem at all. And even though I haven't personally experienced the campaign and a ShadowDark campaign from level 1 to 10, other people have said that there are no issues. That is
people that are saying that must have more free time than me to play role-playing games, because
there's some of us who do it for a living.
Because I still play long games, and it's not a short game. Tabletop RPGs, it's not like playing a game in Monopoly. You sit down for an hour. So 1 to 10 can take you a good year to 2 years, depending on your play style.
One of the things that I've seen a lot of writers who, like me, who do material, who make monsters and homebrew lore and that sort of stuff, and release stuff with their fans, is after the basically Wizards of the Coast turned us against Dungeons & Dragons' core product and made us really not want to write for it or talk about it anymore. A lot of people have cleaved to wanting to write for ShadowDark because it's so easy to write for. It feels like stepping back into a comfortable slipper. It's just like it's got a specific vibe to it. It feels old school. It feels non-political, and it's a joy to write for. And you also feel like you're contributing something to something that you love and needs to grow. So there's a lot of love for it from people who want it to do well. And I think that's the main vibe is like everybody's like, this is all something that we can agree on, that this is good, that this is fun, this is pure, and it's not tainted by agendas and stuff like that. It's just somebody who purely loves role-playing games and wants to promote them and give us a vehicle that that we can all comfortably agree on as the baseline dungeon crawl good system.
Is it easy? Sorry, is it easy to adapt existing adventures too? Like, could you adapt?
Yes.
Could you take Curse of Strahd and throw it in here, or could you keep on the Borderlands?
In that, I'm going to talk about tropes here for a second. In that, like a trope is it's a shared collective understanding of something. It's like, so if I said an orc, for instance, you will have an idea of what the orc is pop into your mind, and it's probably from Warhammer 40k or classic Dungeons and Dragons, and you will know what an orc is. It's a meme in your head that we all share. It's a shared lexicon. So when you say the word orc, we understand what each other are talking about. And it's very important that that is not confused or conflicted, or you're trying to disrupt it for no good reason, because it just won't work. For instance, if you go back to the satanic panic of the 1980s, 90s, where they tried to change the name of devils and demons to Bartizu, and that, like, that's, most people don't even know what you're talking about these days, and it's kind of cringy when you look back and say they tried to change the word that we use, and you can't do it. ShadowDark just throws that out and says, like, here's the basic archetype, here's the basic trope of what fantasy is. And so if you take Strahd and say, what is this tropes of Strahd? You're kind of in a kind of Cthulhu-esque mission. So there's another trope there. You understand that you're doomed from the outset. in a Cthulhu mission. So in Strahd, you're kind of doomed from the outset. It's a grind towards death in Strahd, where the ever escalating tension and hopelessness of your character is kind of the point. And with ShadowDark, it's easy to adapt because it's a simplistic system that can carry the trope on a simple mechanical vehicle. So it's very easy to adapt things into there by shortening them and reducing them and saying, okay, we can fit them into the system because it's simple enough to fit everything. It's like a jelly that just, like it's a mold that can just accept anything into it. It's not. It doesn't have any sharp edges of their own. It doesn't conflict or restrain things. There is one thing about ShadowDark which is restraining, but that's built into the core mechanics as well, and that's the torch system. But we can talk about that later.
Yeah. So I had a little look around, and there have been some people who have reported running Curse of Strahd or ShadowDark and other pre-made adventures, but a lot of the adventures that they're running with ShadowDark are older adventures rather than Wizards of the Coast modern adventures, apart from Curse of Strahd. And this is probably because I haven't heard anybody using Lost Mine of Fendelver, but I don't think that would be a problem.
If anything, Lost Mine of Fendelver would be too simple for ShadowDark.
It might well be. But anyway, yeah, they're using a lot of already existing stuff that's out there. But the community is huge. So the number of adventures that you can get for ShadowDark in this early stage is immense. There's a lot, not just by Kelsey, but a lot of other creators. Everybody is writing for ShadowDark adventures. There are only 4, classes in ShadowDark in the core book, which you look at.
That's what I was going to ask you. That has that been expanded?
But the community's already done all the classes you might want. The community, and most of them are free. You can actually, sometimes you've got to pay for them, but usually they're up on Reddit or something like that. So you've already got a barbarian. Is it a barbarian? A barbarian. You've already got a bard and a ranger done by Kelsey. Bard and ranger done by Kelsey. Somebody's done a monk. I think there's a warlock. There's a druid. They've done the druid. So yeah, all the classes that people were thinking, well, we don't have these. They've made them already. It's already done. So it's whether you look at it in that one page, because it all fits on one page, maybe 2 pages if it's a spellcaster. It's just about looking at it and thinking, is that the type of druid that I want? Because if it isn't, I just need to make a couple of adjustments and she's ready to go. But character creation, absolutely. It's talk.
I'll go through this and just on my brief read of the quick rules, and then you can correct me if I've got anything wrong. But this is my understanding of just reading the rules once, which I thought is quite a good way of approaching it. Like someone that's just read the quick start rules, and did I get a gist of understanding how to roll a character in this game? So you roll the so that's attributes, not abilities, and it's just 3d6, old school. And you do it, and do you roll in order?
Yes, you do. Yep. Right down the line.
So
3 to 6 down the line, as we say.
Yep. So that is, that's going way back. So strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. So no point by, no 46, drop the lowest. You could end up with a 3 or an 18.
Yeah, but there are rules in there that stipulate that if you don't have a score of at least 14, that you re-roll your stats again, the whole lot. You go down the line again, and I recommend that people do that because you probably need to have at least a +2 in something.
This isn't a game where like with 5th edition, for instance, your character's a superhero. So having a dump stat or a deliberately low stat is giving yourself a deliberate weakness. You don't need a deliberate weakness in ShadowDark. Your character is going to be weakened by something or humbled by something at any point anyway. So you're all kind of in the same boat.
But here's the thing. I had Simon in my group rolled up and got nothing higher than a 9. All of it, and I said, well, you need to re-roll that then. And he said, no, I'll play it.
Yes.
And he survived. His character lived. You got through the level 1 adventure. Okay.
He's like the squire. He's like the guy carrying all their shit during the adventure.
Yeah.
He's got
much like something like Dungeon Crawl Classics or some of those grind RPGs where your first or second level character, you don't give your character a name until they make it through the first level, sort of thing. You don't give them a backstory until they get to level 3. You know, that sort of thing. It's you're going to lose a lot of characters, and that's okay.
I like the idea of a squire to the adventure party.
Yeah,
such shit abilities.
Yeah. This is my brother. He's exactly the same as me. He's got a different name because I can't be bothered writing up another character sheet. Yeah, exactly.
But I've also got people in my group currently who've rolled really high. Some of them got nothing lower than a 14. They've all got 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, like really, really high stats. So you just don't know what you're going to get. So you can't plan it. It's not an optimizer's dream. You know, they're not going to have a little wet patch.
This
is not a game for power gamers, really.
It's not.
No, just the fact that the 3d6 is quite controversial anyway to a lot of the new players, but the fact that you have to roll them in order on top of that, it's like, do you know what I mean? Like so that's going to determine. You can't go, I'm going to be a fighter and I'll put you don't have dump stats. There's no dump stat ability here.
Yep.
Either.
Yeah, you don't know what you'll be playing. You play based off what your numbers come up, and really that's what will decide what you wind up doing. So
I'm a big fan of random roll tables. I would put more random roll tables in there if I was Jesse. Like trinkets.
This is something I really thought was really smart as well, is encumbrance, how they handle encumbrance. So items. Characters can carry items equal to their strength or a maximum of 10 slots.
Yeah. Slots.
Yep.
Nice and easy.
Yeah.
It's like your equipment, your graphical representation of an equipment list in a dungeon crawler game, like Diablo or something like that. You've only got so much space that you can put it in. It's kind of visually represented rather than what's the bulk or how many coins of weight is this object. No, just like how bulky can you carry the damn thing or not? And
do you know what's smart about it as well, which absolutely sucks, is we use the metric system here in New Zealand, and everything else, I don't know what a fucking pound is. I struggle enough with feet and all that, so putting slots, that takes care of that sort of universal problem. We're all speaking the same language here. I don't know, because there's a lot of spells in D&D that can carry 150 pounds. What's that, mate? I don't know.
It's like, yes, a javelin is lightweight. Can you carry 50 of them and be an effective adventurer? No. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. It's one of the things my players said when they encountered the gear system, being gear slots, is most things are one gear slot. There's a few things that are no gear slots, so don't have to worry about them, like a backpack. There are some things that are 3 gear slots, like plate armor. You got 3 gear slots gone for that. And you're not going to be wearing plate armor when you start out. It's just not going to happen. You just will not have the money for it. But the interesting thing is, like, it solves the problem of a system where how do you deal with encumbrance and tracking that and making it simple enough that people will be able to understand. And this solves that problem just like that.
Because a lot of us DMs just don't give a fuck. Like, we just stop doing it because it's too hard.
If something is ungainly, we just won't use it.
And I haven't used encumbrance for years, and this means that me and my players can do it, and it's not a problem. And my players,
you do run into that problem if you don't use it. There's a point where your players will take the piss, and suddenly you'll be like, you suddenly go, "Hey, oh come on, guys, you can't, I know you just found 500,000 gold pieces, but you can't just chuck that in your bag of holding.
It's not a credit card, guys. It's a massive weight of metal. How are you going to get it out of here? Exactly.
So my players, when they discovered that they could only carry so much, and they had to make hard decisions about what they would carry and what they wouldn't. It really is a decision. You really have to decide what you're going to take with you. It's really important.
It's like now everybody understands why gemstones are so good.
Exactly. And they said, Fred, we want an animal, we want a pack animal to carry our shit now. And I was like, really?
Mm-hmm.
And then Simon was looking at my facial expression, and they've known me for a very long time, for more than 10 years, quite a lot of them. and they looked at my facial expression because I knew what was going through my mind. I was like, fuck, they've just figured it. They're doing exactly, because I always never said no to a pack animal. And then Simon said, I think it's a really bad idea because Fred is going to fucking burn that animal to the ground every single time. And I said, yes, I am. You're quite
You're
right.
going to fall in love with that pack animal. It's going to become an integral part of your character's identity. I'm going to threaten it every chance that I get.
Yeah, and
it's going to run off into the dungeon every minute. Like it's going to get spooked by a snake and go and scare up some goblins. It's going to be the bane of your existence.
Somebody will have eaten the damn thing and taken all your shit off the pack animal.
There's so many animals. There's so many monsters in D&D. Like griffins, boulet. There's just 2 off the top of my head I can think of who just zero in on pack animals like nobody's business. They're designed to eat them.
We'll get to that when we get to the gameplay mechanics. But I guess you could apply that morale mechanic to your pack animal.
Pack animals are a DM's dream.
Yeah. So,
all right, classes. This was my question for Fred because I've only got the quick start rules. So fighter, priest, thief, and wizard. Though we only get 4 classes. I was just wanting to know we expanded on those.
The core book has only got 4 classes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Everything else you have to go online, but all the classes you might want, like I said, are available for free, and usually on Reddit. And if you can't get the class,
make your own.
You can make your own. Seriously, you could probably sit down, and she kind of explains how to make everything for this game in this book. So you can make it, and it wouldn't be that hard because it's not brain surgery, and it is designed. It's designed for anybody to figure out how to do it.
But it's not like making your own circuit boards. It's like Lego.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And assess ancestry rather than race or species. And we've got dwarf, elf, goblin, halfling, half-orc, and human. So happy to see goblin in here as a playable race.
So here's the other thing is that you'll probably find, and I haven't checked, but you'll probably find that people have already expanded the ancestries as well.
Yeah.
Because there was a desire to expand on what was available, which is great. And it's even easier to make your own ancestry than it is to make your own class.
Yeah. And I do like how the character sheets are just these little small cards.
Yeah. It's one page. And everything on one page.
And fillable PDFs as well.
Yep, that's right.
Yep. So really smart. Just everything about this character creation is smart, and it leads to the tone of the game as well. So
practical.
Else?
No sort of she's trimmed the fat, and everything is practical and straightforward. It makes sense and is useful.
Yeah. Anything else anyone wants to bring up about the character creation side that I missed?
Yeah, I do. So I think the argument has been that creating a character for ShadowDark is going to get boring. That it's because it's so quick and there's so few choices to make, and that you can't play with these characters for a long period of time. But I don't agree. I think that this is probably the mentality of the combat simulation community and the optimizers who can't optimize for this because of the way the game is built. So the step-by-step approach, for one thing, like there's one page where you have that process. Now, the quick start rules and the core book, the layout for that is exactly the same. It's not any different. It actually gives you a page reference where you need to go to look for your stuff. When you're doing your ability scores or your attribute scores, your background, you roll on a table, and it's 1 to 20, and it's just a descriptive sentence. That's it. There are no mechanical things. How you and the dungeon master, as a player and a dungeon master, how you determine how the background of your character interplays in the adventures that you run through is completely up to the group. Your ancestry. Usually ancestries have it's a language. I think it's a language or 2 and 1 feature. There's usually 1 feature. That's it. It might be 2 at the most.
Is it talent? Is that what they call their skill thing? Talent?
Yeah, talents. Yeah, your talents are kind of like feats in ShadowDark, but the difference being is the concept of gaining a talent there's limited sort of things that it's going to do. It's not going to allow you to change everything, and it's randomly determined too. Class features are super simple. There's usually only about probably at the most 4 different things that you might get. That's not counting your weapons you can use, what armor you can use, and so forth. And then you've got your equipment, what level you're going to pick, your attack bonuses is all explained, how to do your spells, that's all there. It's really well thought out. I mean, I was really impressed at just how everything can be found usually on 1 or 2 pages and you're done.
Yeah, like the fact that your class is just 1 page is just so easy for new players. Like you can find you're not flipping through. Like the other day we were playing and we were trying to find how something works for my player's monk class, and we had to like flip through 3 or 4 pages of the player's handbook to find this specific thing we were looking for, where when you're looking at this, it's all on 1 page, a nice, simple font. Like it's just there.
Well, that's true if you're a rogue or you are a fighter, but that's not true if you're a wizard, because you need 2 pages for the wizard and 2 pages for the cleric, and then you've still got to go to the page or section on your spells to select your spells. So it's not it's not like even the spellcasters are stripped down to 1 page, because that's not the case.
It's like 2 pages. Oh, the calamity.
Yeah.
You flip to D&D, half the book is spells.
Yeah. And unlike
and 1 page for an art style as well.
Even Dungeon Crawl Classics. Even Dungeon Crawl Classics, like it's pages. 1 spell is 1 page of that book. It's just like you can't play that without the reference. You got to have the book with you.
You are right, but saying that, the second page is just a table.
It is.
Yeah, it's not even overwhelming. I'm just having a look at it now.
Yeah.
So it's just a table. It's not like it's walls of text.
So character advancement for this is you only go from level 1 to 10, and it's determined by collecting treasure. You do not get experience points necessarily for killing monsters.
Mm-hmm.
Just taking their shit off them. So if you can take all their treasure and they're still asleep, fine.
Mm-hmm.
If they go hunting or they're off somewhere else and you catch them not protecting their treasure, then you can take their treasure and say adios, and you're leveling up by collecting treasure. It's not just gold; it's any kind of treasure. And
there's 3 things which I think are really cool about that. Sorry to interrupt, Fred. One is it's a callback to old school D&D, where things were calculated in coin weight, and experience points were calculated in coins as well. You could play a barbarian who got experience for destroying items, and it's very anti-murder hobo. So you are not encouraged to kill monsters in this game. It's a survival mechanism to make sure that you kill them before they kill you, but it rewards clever play rather than brutal play. So there's no reason to optimize your character for murder. There's a good reason to optimize your character for stealth and that sort of thing. So rogue characters and sneaky characters and sneaky play and clever play and deceptive play is a really good way. Tactical, like distracting and getting the monsters to run off in the wrong direction and then looting their stuff and making a run for it. Good idea. And also 3, that is a boon to dungeon masters who want continuing backstory. Like if your bad guy shows up, bites the adventurers, is very slippery, gets away, but the adventurers keep looting that bad guy. That bad guy is rewarding them over and over again, and it gets better and better and better as you go, because every time you fight that bad guy, they might be getting poorer and poorer and more desperate to get gear and stuff that you keep stealing off them. So they got a real motivation to come after you and hate to see you. So it becomes it's not just a stat block. Now that monster is a personality, and it's a story element in the game.
You could run a game with just a bunch of thieves that just avoid fights.
Yeah. It also makes your character being looted and stolen from and trapped and beaten up and kidnapped and hostaged and have all their gear stolen off, and starting off with no gear. That's a big aspect of the game. Yeah, it's not about just life or death. It's also about property, and that sort of thing.
So there's zero level too. You can
Mhm.
play a zero level character, and a zero level character doesn't have a class.
Mhm.
You have your ancestry stuff, yes, but you don't have a class, and which means that you quite often don't have a weapon.
Yep.
And my players played through an adventure as zero level characters, and they had some fights.
Mhm.
And the first thing you start to realize is it's quite possible to play a zero level character and get through an adventure. And if they're smart enough, they'll be fine,
Yeah.
even with one hit point. Even with one hit point.
Yeah.
There are very few character options or customization in ShadowDark compared to modern Dungeons and Dragons. So if people are into that, they might be a little bit upset. But
Mm.
because there aren't a lot of spelled out, crunchy mechanics and so forth, it means that you're not limited. You don't have to have a feat or a class ability often to do something. You can just do it.
Mhm.
And the
Yeah.
game is very much immune to power gaming behavior or optimizing or min-maxing because all of your characters' numerical values are generated randomly, including your leveling up. It's not
Mm.
just your ability scores or attributes. It's also your leveling up process that is not
Yeah.
determined by you. So yeah, I'm very impressed with the character creation process.
Yeah. So
And
that
it
allows you to that zero level character allows you to play both a kids on bikes adventure where you're playing maybe a juvenile character or an apprentice or something like that. Like the master has been kidnapped and the students must go. They're not ready for this, but they get thrown into it and they become heroes from that. It also allows you to play those Dungeon Crawl Classic character grinder adventures where your character is in dire straits and you'll be lucky to survive and you become attached to that character just because it survived. So yeah, there's nothing really differentiating the characters at the start apart from the fact that this one survived because it's lucky
yeah
and you want that one to carry on.
yeah
Mm.
yeah
Yeah.
and my group were not upset by the gauntlet with zero level characters at all. But then again, I've got power gamers, almost all power gamers in my group, which is funny that they wanted to play this game and they're sold on the
Mm.
idea.
Yeah.
But also too, they weren't upset by the idea that they could drop to zero hit points and be dead.
Yeah.
But we changed. I think for zero level, they decided to have a death timer. There's a death timer in ShadowDark that's a standard, but there's different modes that you can adjust it for as well. But anyway, the core rules. Let's get onto them because that's
Okay, so
super
yeah, so
interesting.
gameplay mechanics. Okay, so it does use pretty much the same dice as Dungeons and Dragons. I think the only one it removes is the D100. I don't think we use a D100.
No, there's D100s, but it's not in the core rules. It is usually for random generation tables for the Dungeon Master.
Okay.
You'll find that they're not
Yep.
true percentile tables. They're usually like 50,
Yeah.
Yep.
but they're using percentile dice to determine.
Yeah. So your
So
standard math rock set will do.
Yeah.
yep. Okay, so we've got the turn structure, 2 actions, which is attack, spell, or skill check, and then you can move up to near distance. I believe near distance is 30 feet. So they've moved. They've put the movement into three sections, which is close, 5 feet, near, 30 feet, and far, which is within sight.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's a nod towards people who play Theatre of the Mind and are not playing with miniatures and stuff on the table. So it's optimized for streaming games. VTT. Well, you don't need to use VTTs and stuff like that to play this game. You can just talk. So you don't need to be very specific. Also, I find that sort of loose measurement makes it really. It gives your character, your players, license to be less precise and more daring. Like, can I swing from this chandelier? Can I leap from this wall to the next one? And you're not calculating spaces on a map. You know what I mean? You're not going, is my miniature touching this square? And it reduces that wargaming aspect to more a theater of the mind adventure aspect.
Yeah. So what I found is I ran the 2 sessions that I've run myself and not played in. Tabletop Bob used a grid, and so we were literally counting squares.
Mhm.
I used all abstract, the abstract movement of close, near, far in terms of distances, and moving near is what you can do with your movement and your action. You can make an attack, cast a spell, do something with a skill. You can do multitask as an action, but you can also move again. Like there's an option in ShadowDark, so you can move twice and just not do anything else.
Double jump.
It's basically double movement.
Yeah, or indeed it'll be a dash.
Yeah, it's really easy to run Theatre of the Mind with the system because of the range increment process.
Again, I think I'm going to say this a lot: simple but smart.
There is a problem though that I have discovered, and I have ignored it because it pissed me off so much. There is a thing called double near range. So the actual increment in terms of how your ranges work is close as anything within 5 feet from melee range. Near is 30 feet from wherever you are, roughly, somewhere in there. It might be less than that, but it's anything that's, anything between more than 5 feet and 30 feet is near.
Yeah. Think of people playing darts. It's an accurate hand thrown distance. It's very important.
And then there's another one that sits between near and far, and it's called double near. And it's often overlooked, and even I've overlooked it because I hate it so much. And it basically means you're dealing with anything that is greater than 30 feet, but within about 60 feet. Okay? And then you have far, which is beyond 60 feet, but you can still see them.
Yeah, that's beyond throwing range. So
double near.
Sorry, you could almost say that.
It's double near dash. I just want to ask.
You go.
It's double near dash. Is that the point of it? That's all I wanted.
It's basically double near, but in terms of range.
Is that for the dash mechanic though? Is that
it is for the dash mechanic, but also in terms of your range increment, it is close, near, double near, and then far. And I overlooked this, and she does point this out in her videos, and people kind of get a little bit confused about it for obvious reasons. And so what I do in my game is I just have close, near, and far. And so that means that if you decide to move with, do a double near movement or move twice and don't attack, then you can get to far distance. But that's me modifying the game because I didn't want to have double near. I just looked at it and I'm like, fuck no. Just give me close, near, and far. But then I've played Fate, and they used zoning. And zoning, zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, right up to zone 6. And that's as far as you go. So in your zones, another sort of abstract range increment system. This here is probably the only thing, I think probably the reason why she went with double near is she couldn't think of another word that describes what would be between near and far without confusion.
Okay.
And I think that's why she's done it, but I ignore it. And the game runs fine, as far as I'm concerned. So, I would.
You go, AJ. Sorry, mate. I just wanted to get my head around that.
So the way I visualize near is if I've got a melee weapon, I can easily approach and hit you with it. Everybody maintains quite a distance when they're fighting with weapons. You're not within 5 feet of somebody most of the time. You're within 10 or 15 feet of somebody, and you approach when you're attacking or defending and things like that. So most of it is circling around people, and it takes up quite a bit of space when you're doing that in combat. But that's from LARPing and things. Then you've got throwing distance, right? So in LARP, you have a beanbag or a dart or a nerf arrow or something like that. So when you're throwing a beanbag, you can throw it accurately within 30 feet, like you're throwing a dart at a dartboard. Try throwing a dart at a dartboard from 60 feet. Yes, you can throw that far, obviously. Can you throw that far accurately? No, you can't. So I'd call that medium or imprecise near. It's with it. You can certainly hit it if you throw something that far, but are you going to be able to hit them accurately every time? Probably not. Yeah, and that counts with spears and things like that too. You can Hail Mary and throw a spear 120 feet, maybe, if you're really good. But can an Olympic athlete hit a target with a javelin at that distance? Lucky if they could. You could stand there comfortably and have an Olympic athlete throw a javelin at you, and I'd be fairly confident they wouldn't be able to hit me.
LARPing, we couldn't get nerdier.
True. Yeah.
Okay. Difficult class. So it has a DC system: easy 9, normal 12, hard 15, extreme 18. Another smart thing she's done is she has taken probably my all-time favorite mechanic of 5e, advantage and disadvantage.
Mhm.
And she has also put things in for a natural 20, automatic success and critical hit, and natural 1, automatic fail and potential harm.
Yep.
So
So she's cleaving to the idea of if you roll a dice, you get an expectation what that dice that number means when you roll it. So if you roll a 15, it should be good. Should be good. Yeah.
So this is, I guess, this is one of the more controversial things to do, which I believe will become the norm once our community actually has enough experience and knows what the hell they're talking about. And she's adapted it and adopted it because it is the way of the future. Wizards of the Coast wanted to do it and put it into the core system, but the community are simply incapable of understanding it. And I give Wizards of the Coast a really hard time about this sort of stuff, about a lot of things. But this is one thing they're right about. And that is, if you're asking your players to roll a dice, there should be a chance of success and there should be a chance of failure. And if you're asking them to roll a dice and they can't fail, why the hell did you ask them to roll a dice in the first place? Other than to be a bastard. And if they can't succeed, why did you ask them to dice other than to be an asshole?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because you've said that there's a chance of them succeeding or failing by giving them, saying you can roll a dice. Don't let them roll a dice if they can't fail or succeed. This game acknowledges that.
But you do get players that ask if they can roll a dice.
And you tell them no if they can't succeed or fail.
Okay, so then you've been an asshole.
Well, no. What it does is it sets up in your mind, there isn't a chance that what you're trying to do, you cannot harpoon the moon and pull it down to you. So fucking don't try that.
You can try, but it's futile.
You can try, but it ain't going to work.
It's just going to waste your time. Yeah.
You're wasting your time.
Yeah.
And this game acknowledges the fact that you do not have to roll dice for every decision that players make.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a problem that a lot of people struggle with because they believe, and I think there's a portion of our community who believe that for a game to be a game, there must be rules, but the definition of a game is not that it has rules at all. It has that's if you look at the definition of game, not your version of what you think game is, because that's nobody gives a shit about that. The reality is that the actual definition of that has no rules, and it does not have to involve dice, and it does not have to involve anything. It is just a game that you play.
Mm-hmm. And it's a recreational pastime, a storytelling.
It can be any range of different things.
Yeah.
So, but there's a lot of people who believe that you must be rolling dice for it to be a game, and this is going back to the fact that adults struggle with the idea of playing a game and feeling like it's legitimate, and they're not just playing make believe like a kid, because they feel self-conscious and silly that they don't have a game that has rules to legitimize the fact that they are playing a game, other than they're just sitting around the table goofing off with their friends.
Frank Mentzer put this really well when he said role-playing games were unique and new and innovative in that traditionally games always had a winner or a loser. Role-playing games make the opponent in the game fictional. It's make-believe. So you're all of you who are playing the role-playing game as characters, as players, are on the same side, and the opponents that you're playing against are fictional characters made by the Dungeon Master. He's not the opponent. He's also on your side. So that's the important distinction of what a role-playing game is. It's not an oppositional game. So PvP is very uncomfortable for a lot of people in role-playing games. They don't like people playing their characters against each other. They don't like it. Some people love it, but most people don't, I find.
And if you love it, play Paranoia.
Yeah, exactly. There's games for you. Yeah.
One thing I want to say about this DC difficult class thing, it's smart because of the way that we're doing our attributes or abilities. So this DC chart, you can't optimize for it. You know what I mean? Like it's actually 18 is going to be hard.
Yeah, this is a good example where ShadowDark has adapted the modern developments of role-playing games, where role-playing games have developed, they have advanced, the technology has improved, and it's not always good to go back. Like BECMI has got definite limitations and problems with it, that modern players just go, oh, this is clunky. And it's like, yeah, we learned that we can do a better way. Yeah. So like useless dice rolls, get rid of those. They just bulk down gameplay, smooth it, streamline it. What is the objective of this? It's the dice roll is to project the story forward in a different direction. It's not to stop you in your tracks. It's not to make you roll dice for no reason when we can just narrate something. Like, for instance, if you have a rogue character, you're specialized and an expert at locks. So if that lock is not magical, your character automatically, just like a supernatural creature, can only be harmed by supernatural weapons. Why? We don't really need to describe it, because it's really good at soaking up damage. You can shoot it with bullets and stuff, but it's vulnerable to magic. So a rogue, for instance, can beat any lock. You don't need to roll dice for it. If it's not a masterwork lock or a magical lock, the rogue is just going to beat it, because that's what their character is designed to do.
And the rules state very simply that there are times when you shouldn't roll the dice and times that you should. And it stipulates that things like the player's actions in terms of clever ideas or having a character with a specific training, you don't need to roll the dice for climbing a rope. Like climbing a rope, like they should all be able to do that. Searching for something, if you decide that you're going to search in the drawer to the desk, you don't have to roll the dice to find the damn thing. If there's a hidden compartment, because you're looking you've stated where you're going to look.
Yeah.
If you say that I pull down on all of these torch scones in the room to see if there are like a secret hatch or compartment, you don't have to roll dice because you've activated it. You actually told them exactly what was going to actually open the secret door. Or I pull out the book out of the bookcase to see if that opens up a sliding hatch. If you're specific, you succeed. There is no dice roll. And if the team gets together and works together to, say, lift a heavy boulder blocking the way, there's no dice roll. You just do it. And this is really where I think a lot of people get stuck. They get attached to, I must roll the math dice. Math dice must be rolled. And if I do not have math dice rolling, then it's not a game and there's something wrong with it. But that's not true.
Back in like 3.5 edition, we had taking 10 or taking 20. Taking 10 means you take a length of time, and if it's not the full length of time, you're still rushing. You get, basically, you assume that your dice roll on a 20 would be 10. If you take a long time, that means you've used up your resource of time. If you've got people chasing you, or you've got pace going on, which you should always have going on with adventures, if you take 20, you're taking a long time to expertly do something. Like you are putting the picks and the levers in to disable a trap. You're taking 20, you're doing it properly by the book. You know this trap, you're being very cautious, and you assume that you've rolled a 20 because you've done an expert job. There's no other factors involved, and you succeed usually.
Yeah. And there will be situations that even if you've got training, that might be really hard, and the game master's left to their own decision making to decide, okay, if this is a really difficult thing and you're trained in it, you probably have advantage. You probably get advantage on the dice roll. And you will have to roll for this because you're dealing with something that's far more difficult than your standard lock.
Yeah.
Or whatever the heck it is you're dealing with.
A good example of that is if you've got a puzzle, which is, say, you can only put the red gems into the blue container, because back when you first entered the dungeon, there was a fresco that had the color code in there that would get you past this trap easily if you paid attention and understood and put the two together. But if you don't, and the rogue is trying to get past that thing anyway, that's when you have a dice roll or something like that. Yeah, I can't figure out the trap. If you figured out the puzzle, if you put the time in the role-playing effort to figure out the puzzle, you could have gotten through here easily. But because you didn't, now there's a chance that you're going to screw it up.
Yeah.
You didn't, that's when you use dice rolls.
Yeah. It is more of a last resort.
Yeah. You can still go back to the beginning of the dungeon and figure it out. It's like, oh, okay, we had to put the red gems in this thing. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's another thing about ShadowDark, which you're probably aware of, but let's spell it out. Bound accuracy. ShadowDark has flatter maths, and it promises what bound accuracy was supposed to achieve with Dungeons and Dragons 5e. ShadowDark never said that it would deliver this, but it certainly does a greater job of achieving that than Dungeons and Dragons 5e or 2024 D&D. And because there is no proficiency bonus and you're only adding your modifier to a dice roll, that changes everything. With a stat check or an ability check, you're only adding your modifier. And because your hit points, you only add your constitution modifier once at level 1. You never add it again after that. It's just whatever you roll on the dice.
So it's not
for
like
hit points.
in 5e, like you have to inflate the DCs because the baseline is, you know what I mean? It's always increasing.
Exactly.
Yeah. And there is no scaling system for character levels. The scaling system is the random generation when you level up every 2 levels, because you level up every 2 levels. Is built in. There's math built into it, but you don't know where those bonuses are going to go. It might not go exactly where you want it to go. It could go somewhere else. So ShadowDark, because of that, delivers far better than D&D 5e did on the concept of bound accuracy, where things that are low level can still potentially be a threat. I still question that is even possible. I actually think it is a nonsense to expect any system to have a low level threat or monster continue to be a threat when you're level 10. I think that's bollocks. And no system should ever be able to achieve that, because that doesn't make sense, because maths doesn't work that way. Okay. The 3 core dice mechanics. If you look at ShadowDark, there are only 3 core dice mechanics for resolving anything. That is the stat check or ability check. There are no skills because you don't need them. You use stat checks. And then attack rolls and the spellcasting check. That's it. And everything in terms of an ability check, skill check, or a saving throw, no saving throws exist. They're all condensed down into being the stat check, because essentially they are the same damn thing. Okay.
Can we talk about the spell check? That's quite important.
Yeah, we'll get it.
Yeah, all you got all your normal checks that you would have for strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, charisma, all exist. But if you need to make something that seems like it should be a saving throw, it's a stat check. If you think it should be a skill check, it's a stat check. If it's an ability check, it's a stat check. This is really where I wish BECME had gone, but BECME is the early development of Dungeons and Dragons. So awesome.
Yeah.
This is like the natural evolution of BECME.
Yeah.
Almost. Yeah. So before we get into spells, there's a couple of other things I did want to go through. Moral.
Did we talk about
morale?
The torch timer?
Morale, sorry. No,
So
I want to go through.
I want to go morale, and let's do the torch timer after.
Yeah, we've got morale, death, and the new environmental mechanics that it does, and then spellcasting. Is that all right?
Yeah.
So morale, enemies flee if reduced to half or fail a DC 15 wisdom check.
Yeah. They don't automatically fight to the death.
No, that's like I keep saying this, simple but smart.
Yeah. Which means that it's unnecessary for you to go out and kill monsters, because you don't get experience for killing them. And if you just scare them off, they'll run away. And it gives you many opportunities for having recurring monsters, or monsters which it's a decision to kill them. It's not a game mechanic.
But also it duplicates what you would expect monsters to do.
Yeah.
Because they shouldn't, not all monsters will fight to the death. And if they do fight to the death, and there are monsters that ignore morale checks, there are some monsters that will fight till they die. But in general, unless it states that in the stat block, they do run away.
It's a fight or flee mechanic. It makes sense. Yeah.
I can 100% guarantee that a weasel will never run away. I know this from life. Yeah.
Honey badger.
Honey badgers, yeah. Yeah. I do not believe the word flee.
Death timer. 1d4 plus con modifier is the rounds, minimum of 1, and a natural 20 will revive you with 1 hit point.
Yep.
Nice
So
and
I've seen that
simple.
in play, and people have said that ShadowDark is one of the more lethal games you can play. I don't agree.
No.
I don't agree. There's no instant death, unlike D&D 5e, where if you take twice as much damage as your maximum hit points, you're instantly killed. You can't be instantly killed in this game unless you use a different death timer. Unless you use a different mode of play, you cannot be. So even if you design your system and you have a trap that does 10d6 and they're level 1, you're still not going to kill them. They're just on 0 hit points, and then the death timer starts. So I actually think it makes it much easier to design an adventure for that and not overclock it and create a problem. It means that if you throw a monster at them that's too powerful, it's not the end of the world. They might go down, but they're not dead. They're on the death timer. Now it's just up to you whether you decide the animal, if everybody else runs away and leaves the the dying individual on the ground, whether they help him by stabilizing them, or her or him, or they use cure wounds or curing spells or potions or whatever. It's up to them to decide that. Or will the creature, as a game master, you then decide, do they leave them there or do they eat them? I mean, it's but I mean, that there in itself does not mean this is a lethal game. So far, nobody in my game has died. I think we had one person when we were playing with Tabletop Bob who died, and we ran away and left him to die because we could not cope with everything anymore. The only reason he died is because we left him to die. Okay, that was our choice, and I had 1 hit point, and I think somebody else had 1 hit point, and we survived a long, long time.
Yeah.
So we'll get into the environmental mechanics. So is it safe to say that ShadowDark takes care of one question that one answer that I constantly fucking hate to hear at my table? My player has dark vision.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
So light sources are limited to near distance and with timers for extinguishment. Darkness limits vision and imposes penalties for creatures that are not adapted to it.
Yeah.
So how do you want to explain this torch mechanic? I guess is that what they call it?
Yeah, it is. AJ, you go for it and your experience, and I'll explain what I felt when I was doing it.
No, Fred, you take this one because I don't actually like the torch mechanic in this one.
Okay, so I do like the torch mechanic, and there's a lot of people who hate it for a variety of different reasons.
Oh, that's good. We've got a positive and a minus, and no opinion here. So
now, first of all, there are a lot of people who do not understand the threat of darkness. And I find that the older players understand this. Because in real life, when you're in the dark, it's scary as a kid. And as you get older, maybe you outgrow that, maybe you don't. But when you can't see something, there's more fear. Not seeing the monster and knowing that there's something breathing or growling out there, but you can't see it, is scary as shit. And that is what this is trying to duplicate. And it means that when you're in darkness, the threat increases. You are now in greater threat. Things are going to attack you when you're in the dark, and you can't see them. That does not mean that you get to attack them because you don't see them. It doesn't mean that you have disadvantage on attacks or anything. You just don't see them.
Mm-hmm.
You better light yourself up, a torch or a lamp or a lantern or something like that, or use a spell to create light. Otherwise, you're fucked. You really are. And my players were very much aware of the torch timer. One of the biggest problems with a game is determining how time works, because it's usually abstract. It was always abstract for me. It's usually abstract for dungeon masters. So in the mind of the dungeon master, time is passing in whatever way you think it should be passing. It's not true time. It's just passing the way you think it should. And the players, they don't know what that abstract thing is that the dungeon master's making up. And there's a disconnect between player and dungeon master when it comes to the abstract nature of time. But when you start making time a real factor, because you're using real time, It changes everything. You're now both on the same page. This is why I like it so much. It eliminates that bridge that you can't cross between player and dungeon master in terms of tracking time. Now you're not sold. It's not like time is always by the torch timer, because the torch timer is really only when you're in darkness, and you can break that for certain things. There's discussion about using abstract time in the game as well. So it's not just the torch timer. It's not just real time all the time. But it's a really smart application, having the burning torch or the burning light, that I've seen. It's the smartest application of time I've ever seen. And the reason being is that you get rid of that contrived problem and the abstract concept, but it does two things. First off, a torch burns for 1 hour if you're using a torch. It stops a procrastinating player making decisions. One of the biggest problems for slow-ass, boring games is players who can't get their act together. And that changes everything. I can tell you, you play a fast game when you have a torch timer going. The other thing is, slow play styles become a much faster experience. They have no choice. It's not just about whether they make decisions or not. You have to make fast decisions. But you actually have to play fast. That means that the time it takes you to roll your attack dice and your damage dice better be quick, because it matters. And the time it takes you to look up your spell and cast your spell and tell that information to the dungeon master, it matters. Everything you do needs to be done quickly. There is no, I'll look for my dice. You better be ready, because this is what my players found, is they had to be fast. Do you know what this means? In a 2-hour session, if you're crawling and you're in a dungeon or you're using a torch timer, you're going to go through 2 torches. You better make sure that you're keeping an eye on when the torch goes out, because the dungeon master is. And it's easy. You just set a timer in your way. It's a piece of cake. But it also means that you're probably in 2 hours going to have 5 or 6 battles if you get into fights.
A 60-minute hourglass on the table would be...
Yep. But your phone
would be a cool...
You can buy those from warehouse stationery places, really cheap.
But you can use your phone. You can just use your phone. You can use your watch. You can use the timer on your computer. There's plenty of ways to have a timer going. So that changes everything. I think it's my favorite part of the game. So far, the 2 sessions I've run, my players have engaged in an entire adventure in 2 hours, complete. And then the next session, almost complete the entire adventure with 3 players. And we always wanted to have that fast play. We get it this way. That's why I like it.
It's a situational mechanic, though, isn't it?
It is.
Like it only applies to crawling.
It only applies to darkness.
Darkness.
Yeah. Only time. But I think it's a great way to deal with that problem. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah. Okay, AJ, what's your con?
The con is that it forces a style of gameplay, which is hacking. So that's if you want to build tension and things like that, sometimes having that continual pace built into the mechanics of the game is you have to work around it, sort of thing. I can understand. Yeah, all of the points you made are perfectly valid, but I don't like it because I like doing that narratively. For me, pacing and things like that means you've got something chasing you, or you're running out of air, or something like that. So they're usually abstract sort of things that have a solution. And in this, you've got magic that you can use. Clever players can probably start a fire with materials or something like that. They can improvise and things, and that takes up the resources of you're unprotected or undefended while you're trying to build a fire. You have to use your attribute, your intelligence or dexterity or something to make the fire work, because you don't have skills and things. So it's one of those things which I would end up working around. And I can see one of the problems I have, and the fundamental problem I have, is that when you're first starting out an adventure, or if you have inexperienced players and stuff like that, they are disadvantaged just because of who they are as a person. It's got nothing to do with their character. So if it takes them a long time to figure out what to do on their turn, they're disadvantaged, and it's got nothing to do with what their character's doing or what's going on in the game. they are slowing down things because you're penalizing them for not being experienced players. And that's not okay. So in that regard, I would be more lenient. Like I'd say, okay, when you're flipping through the rule book, I'm going to pause the timer. Okay, we're outside of game time. It's subjective time in the game, and now we're just at the table figuring out a rules thing or having an argument, a discussion about, did you get that javelin or not? So you're having an out of character discussion. But as soon as you start talking in character and they're talking about the metagamey stuff in the game, then you flip the timer over and carry on again. That's what I would do.
So you might be right, because I haven't seen what it's like for a completely new group, but I have talked to some people who have run it for new people, and they said that they haven't had a problem.
Yeah, no, it's not a right or wrong thing. It's just my opinion. It's just my vibe.
Yeah. The thing I did notice too, which was much to my surprise, is I ran an adventure. First adventure I ran for ShadowDark with my home group. Now my home group are all dungeon masters.
Yeah.
They're all familiar with 5e. Some have played 4e. Some have played 3.5. Some have played BECME or AD&D. And they also play, and they're almost all power gamers. So they are very invested in learning rules, and they're all really smart. They're all smarter than I am. And I presented them an adventure, first level adventure, their first level, and there were a lot of fights. And at the end of it, they said, there wasn't a climax fight. And I said, well, because half the fights, you found a different solution than killing them.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though there were a lot of battles potentially, they halved that by just doing stuff that was smart. And that changed the whole nature of the adventure. So if you think that having a torch timer and this game is just a hack and slash game, no, you could easily play through and it will be very narrative. In fact, I ran them through an adventure called the Fungus Village, full of pixies.
Oh, God, pixies.
Almost entirely narrative. There was almost no fighting. And I said, did you have a good time? And they said, yes, we did, Fred. There were some fights in it, but I will say it's probably the extent of, I don't know, 15 minutes out of our 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Say half an hour for being, just catching up and being idiots. But, at 2.5 hours of play, 15 minutes was fighting, and the rest was all just talking to NPCs. So ShadowDark can do that. It definitely can.
Yeah, they all came out with pixies in a jar. Just shake them up to make them glow more.
Yeah.
No, they all came out with pixie dust, mate.
Yeah.
They did some labor in the village, and they all wound up with pixie dust.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
In my considerable experience, pixies are one of the most lethal creatures in the game, and you should approach with caution at all times. And never let your characters play. Never let your players play pixies unless they're all pixies, and it's a pixie versus the world campaign.
So I can tell you, I've let players one person be a pixie. It's not the end of the world, and yeah, I know it can go badly. But yeah, and they were all zero level characters when they went and dealt with the pixies in the village. So don't you worry. There's ways of handling it. But look. Can I just say that combat is fast and simple? Like, if you go theatre of the mind, you're playing ShadowDark, a battle can be finished in less than a minute. That's how fast it is. There's no opportunity attacks, which is wonderful, because as a person who actually practiced martial arts for many years,
or bonus actions.
No bonus actions. Yeah, there's 2-action economy: movement and an action. That's it.
Yep.
And you can have free actions, but you can only do usually one of those things. If you do more than one free action, then it becomes what's called multitasking, which is an action to do. And for years, I've been so frustrated with opportunity attacks, because I understand what they're trying to duplicate in the game in terms of mechanics, but it's never simulated that idea very well. And frankly, I don't think there's any real true benefit to trying to duplicate the concept of the opportunity attack, because nobody has any bloody idea what it's like in a real fight when it comes to designing for it. So it's better just to leave it out. And I really appreciate that it doesn't exist in the game at all. It's great.
Should we get into spell casting?
What about weapon damage? Did you mention that when you're doing your weapon damage, they do a lot less damage, the weapons, and but also ranged weapons don't do a lot of damage. And there's only one finesse weapon in the game, and it's the dagger. So you can't. There's no multi-attacking in this game. Like, you're not attacking more than once. You get one attack. That's it. You cast one spell. That's it. There's no dual wielding in ShadowDark. You only ever get one attack or one.
So this is why, your combat is sped up.
Just
taking away all these little things that have slowed down. 5e.
Yeah, and your damage is just your weapon damage or your spell damage. You don't add a modifier to it. You're not adding your ability or stat modifier to that damage roll.
Yeah. In play, it's very fast.
It's very
fast, very straightforward.
Yeah. Let's do spells, man. Absolutely.
So there's only two spell casting classes. Obviously, the wizard and the priest. I've got here on my brief notes, focus spells require maintaining concentration through checks each turn. A critical success doubles the effect or extends the focus of the spell's duration. Failure, the spell fails, cannot be cast again until rest. Critical fails include penalties such as possible divine displeasure for priests. And I think is there a critical fail chart for the wizard as well?
Yeah, it's mishaps table.
Mishaps, that's it.
Yeah, it's got, so depending on what level of your wizard is, you'll be rolling on a different table for your mishaps. And the higher the level of your wizard, the more vicious the consequences of rolling a 1 on your spell casting check for that is. If you're a cleric, it's much more brutal because you have to pay penance to your deity if you roll a 1 and you lose access to that spell. And so that might mean you have to give away money, or
you have offended the Shaolin Temple and my family.
That's right. Yeah, you may have to go and pray for a long time. You might have to go and heal the poor, or whatever it is. Or if depending on the god, maybe you have to go and butcher a whole lot of people. No, seriously.
Gods be fickle, yo.
There's a few gods that are pretty rough, and the priests can have those deities.
It does come with a deity list as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So,
penance, is that what they call it? Yeah, you have to play penance. Yeah, and it comes with a sacrifice value as well, isn't there? For depending on the tier of the spell. Yeah,
it does. Yeah.
I don't know much about the spell casting, so I'll let that. I'll let you dive into that a bit more. They're my notes, pretty much.
Sure. Do you want to go, AJ?
No, go ahead.
So the thing that I noticed with this is spell casting is really simple. It's a very small selection of spells, just like basic D&D, that you can cast, and you can cast them as many times as you like until you fail that check. So there's a couple of consequences to having a system that works this way, and that is you may wind up with unlimited spells, or you might wind up with none of your spells going off in your game session. But there is a mechanic in the game called the luck token, which allows you to re-roll a 20-sided dice. So if you roll a shit number and you're going to fail the check, and particularly around priests rolling, say, and failing their healing spell, their cure wounds, or any kind of healing, you don't want to fail that because you don't want to lose that spell. So you roll your luck token, which means you roll another dice, and if it gets higher, then you take that dice. It's
luck tokens, ShadowDark's version of inspiration.
It is. Yep. Luck tokens are assigned to player characters for whatever the dungeon master wants. There are no set prescription for how you earn luck tokens. If you show up and you bring a whole lot of beer for your dungeon master and they give you a luck token, that's how it works. If you show up with pizza and feed everybody and you get a luck token, that's how it works. If you do something clever you get a luck token, fine. If you do something shit and you're constantly failing and your dungeon master decides to give you a luck token, you get a luck token. It's however the dungeon master sees. This is how the system should work, in my opinion. So this is what happens. If you fail your check for your spell, you use your luck token. When you run out of luck tokens, or you don't have a luck token, because you can only have one luck token at a time.
That's really important.
Yeah.
Limited resources.
What happens if you roll your extra dice and you still don't succeed on your spell casting check? Well, somebody else in your group's got a luck token, and they're going to use their luck token, and they're going to roll. And this happens in my group. Like, I went through, and the entire group used all their luck tokens to make sure the cure spell actually worked.
Nice. I like that. Rewarding. I'm looking at you, Josh, that drunk on my Pepsis on Friday night and didn't bring any drinks.
You have a limited resources called hospitality.
So that in itself means that you can mitigate, as long as your dungeon master is giving you out luck tokens, you can mitigate the failure of a spell casting check. Yeah. The power of a spell is titled as a tier, so they're called spell tier rather than spell level. So you don't get confused between spell level and character level.
That's something I picked up on straight away, because that is so confusing in 5e. Like, my 5th level wizard can only cast, 3rd level spell. That it's convoluted, and this does seem, once again, simple.
Yep.
And smart.
Yeah, it's what we call a non-Vancian spell system. So Vancian means simply fire and forget. So you prepare your spells. You're carrying around that limited selection of spells. You can't. One of the advantages of priests is they could just openly select from their entire spell list, because they're getting granted those spells by a god. One of the the thing that was a requirement to priests originally was they had a lot of restrictions on what they could do to other people morally and ethically and stuff. They had to follow the tenets of their god and things, and a penalty would be they lost access to that spells and things. That has always been sliding towards in the player's favor, with less and less restrictions on what they do. That doesn't really work with the way the divine system was originally just intended. With this, it's a straight up resource. It's a straight up round by round sort of resource, and it's very responsive to what you're doing in play, rather than a set system which restricts your behavior or limits your resources overall. So you can keep using that spell because you're trained to use that spell, and it's a matter of like endurance and stuff. That's what your character's designed to do. And blowing all your spells unwisely right at the start of the adventure is like a really big bad thing that happens in Beckme. Like once your spellcasters cast their spells and they've got no more spells left, they're useless.
Guys, can we take a rest? Can we take a rest, guys?
Yeah. Can we take a rest? It's like, man, like it's 10 o'clock in the morning. We can't sleep yet.
We just started.
But I cast my spell. It's like, no. Yeah.
Hey guys, let's set up camp.
Yeah. And this one it's like, okay, I'm gonna cast a spell. Nobody move. It's like, don't mess this up. There should be. That's what I like about this. It's spell casting is inherently dangerous because it's a powerful resource. Like one of the things I loved about Warhammer Fantasy and a lot of other games is if you cast a spell, Dungeon Crawl Classics is a perfect example of this. You cast a spell, there's a chance it'll mess up and mutate you, and things like that. So it's a risky profession. So yes, they're glass cannons and stuff. And yes, they can forget their spell and kind of be useless for a while, but it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the fun of adventuring for that player playing that character. They're no longer just an unskilled rogue, Now that, the wizards can do things. And getting things that help with spellcasting, like a focus or a wand or some sort of magic item that you've homebrewed and put in there, that becomes just like, oh, they want it so bad. So it's a great spellcasting system. I prefer it to Vancian by far.
Yeah, it is my preferred version. And
cantrips are the best thing that ever happened to D&D.
Yeah, but ShadowDark does not have cantrips.
No.
There's no such
thing.
They're
all cantrips, but they're cantrips that can fail.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
And the reason for this is that, because your combat is probably 1 or 2 minutes long, you could, in an hour, you might have 3 or 4 fights, even if you avoid half of those fights. So you might have had potentially 8 encounters in an hour, but you only got involved in 4 fights. you've well and truly run out of spells
Oh yeah,
if you're using a modern system, and you'd be
Yep.
back to your cantrips.
yeah.
So
Or in this case, you would be relying on scrolls,
Yeah.
potions, that sort of thing, or
Yeah.
expendable resources. One thing I'd like to see with ShadowDark, and one thing that I would definitely homebrew for a higher level play, would be meta magic. So you use those cantrips, and like instead of just a ray of frost, you can now split the ray into two parts that do half damage to each one, because essentially you're using both hands to cast a ray at the same time. That sort of thing.
I just want to say how intuitive and simple this game is. I knew sweet fuck all about spellcasting, and the moment that you were talking, I just went and quickly read the rules, and I just got my head around it straight away.
Yep.
So a wizard is roll a 1d20 plus intelligence, and a priest is roll a 1d20 plus wisdom, and the spell thing you've got to hit is 10 plus whatever tier it is.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
That's it.
level, the tier 1 spell
Is an 11.
is 11.
Yep,
And
and a 12.
and the
2,
highest
12.
DC you have to hit is a 15 if
Yeah.
you're spell casting for tier 5.
How many
So
attributes are there?
The basic, the same as
Dungeons
5e,
and
I
Dragons,
believe.
there's 6.
Strength, dex,
Yeah.
con, intelligence,
See,
wisdom,
what
and
I would like
charisma.
to see is there should be a character class for every attribute,
And there is.
and there is basically.
You're
But
just
I
going to
just-
go into the
yeah.
community.
Just want to say, I can read that in 2 minutes,
Mm.
and just totally understand how magic works in this game.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
so to give you an idea of just how good the system is, because the system is structured the way it is, there's no prepared spells. You don't have the usual system in Dungeons and Dragons 5e and even older versions where you once you know the spell, or you have a list of spells that you know, then you have to take from that known spell list that you have,
Mhm.
you have to prepare a certain number of spells. And then from those prepared spells, you can only cast a certain amount of spells using spell slots. There's no slot system. There's no
No.
prepared spell system. There's none of that bullshit tracking.
Mm.
And it solves so many problems.
There's no mana points. There's no endurance that gets reduced, or
So what's focus? How does focus work?
Focus is like concentration in 5e, and basically it's essentially a spell that is so powerful that you have to keep concentrating on it rather than it being a instantaneous spell.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so things like flying and visibility, which are really powerful effects, would certainly be concentration.
yeah, just
Um,
like in
so-
Harry Potter, where you can flick off a spell, or they have that wizard battle where they're both beaming energies
Yep.
from their wands because it's representing like arcane power, will versus will sort of thing. That's concentration. Or telekinesis, where you're concentrating and lifting things moment by moment. That's a concentration spell.
Yeah.
Makes
So
sense that way.
Do you
So-
have to make a check to maintain focus, and can you not cast any other spell while using a focus spell?
Well, you can't cast other spells while you're focusing. That's
No,
just
you-
Yep. No, I just want to get it nice and
So
plainly.
It's really simple.
Yeah.
Yep.
You
straightforward.
cast-
It's intuitive.
You can't cast another spell, as AJ said, when you're focusing on that spell,
Mm-hmm.
because you have to use your action to continue focusing on it.
Like witch bolt or something.
To cast the spell, initially, you make your spell casting check.
Yep.
Yep.
After that, every round that you are focusing on the spell, there is no dice roll.
Okay.
Okay, you're not making another dice check. And I can't remember if you have to make a dice check if you take damage.
So obviously in 5e you do. If
Yes,
you're
in 5e you
concentrating.
do. In this system, I can't remember if you're required to do something like that. But I will certainly, just because I haven't played enough of it, and we're still struggling. Me and my group are still struggling with getting our head around the fact that we're going from 5e to ShadowDark, and there are
Yeah.
some differences.
Yeah.
It's
Like
not.
you just got shot with a crossbow bolt. Does that disrupt my concentration? Yes, because you're dead.
I tell you what does. Why Fred's looking this up. I tell you what has taught my players really well about how concentration works. Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah.
Because that is built into the game, and so many players are like, pick all these cool spells and suddenly realize that all the spells they picked are concentration spells, and every time they're taking their turn and casting, they're negating the last thing they cast, and they're like,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like, oh, and now all my players that have played Baldur's Gate 3 now understand concentration. So Thank you, Larian Games, for teaching my players a mechanic that I've been trying to teach them for years.
Yeah. And thanks, Larian, for making undead creatures worse.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that I did notice in the game system is if you make an unarmed attack, there's no rules to indicate how much damage you do when you make an unarmed attack.
Oh, so no bludgeoning.
Well, I mean, it just doesn't spell out what you roll in terms of damage dice if you decide to make an unarmed attack, which sort of suggests that you never make an unarmed attack. You always have a weapon. It does have rules for improvised attacks, but that is one of the.
I just rule that as 1d4 plus strength straight away. Just
well, I think it wouldn't be. See, in a system like that, you wouldn't add your strength modifier. It's probably just going to be one hit point. Do you know what I mean? Because usually your damage dice don't have a modifier added to it.
My experience of real world fist fights and things like that, if you're using an unarmed attack against like something like an orc or something like that, only a critical hit is actually going to do damage. Really, otherwise it's just punching, it's pummeling at each other. You're going to hurt each other. You're going to bruise each other. You're going to come across with scrapes and dents and stuff. But so would crawling through a dungeon anyway. It's going to tire you out for sure. But only if you get a critical hit are you actually going to potentially kill that person. Most hand-to-hand combat is non-lethal. You're designing to disable the person. So grappling is more important in unarmed combat than actually damage. Disabling and tiring somebody out or delaying them is more important than damage in unarmed combat, mostly. There's people who will probably argue with that. It's like, yeah, but if you can kick somebody in the head and they just go, oh, then it's not a lethal attack.
I found it. It's on page 50. If you take damage or become distracted while focusing, and I think this is what was going to be happening, due to an earthquake, for example, or whatever the heck the Dungeon Master makes up, essentially, you must immediately make a spell casting check to maintain focus. But unless you take damage, you don't make a spell cast. So it is still very, very similar to how
okay.
You're
just basically re-rolling the same check that you did to cast the spell.
It's exactly
so a wizard could be in a full-on fist fight and still be maintaining a telekinesis spell.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. I've pretty much covered everything in my list of gameplay mechanics. I mean, we have been talking about gameplay mechanics for over an hour.
Yeah.
Oh, longer almost.
Yeah.
Hour and a half. Jesus.
Anything
else anyone else wants to mention before we move into the wrap up sort of end?
Well, I want to talk about monsters because we got to talk about monsters, and I've got a really short bit on the Dungeon Master tools, but we got to talk about monsters.
Okay, you go.
Do you want to talk about monsters, AJ? Otherwise, I'm just going to rattle this out real fast.
My main thing is that the system is a little simplistic for some of the monsters that I like to represent, and that I would do a lot of homebrewing of the system. But of course, this is such an easy system to homebrew. The danger with homebrew is that you might inexplicably break a mechanic, which is so simple that it didn't, if you modify it, it's like pulling one card and all of the rest of them fall down sort of thing. Like you can't change ranges and things like that. And giving a creature the ability to teleport when it moves, mixing up that action movement ratio can be really damaging. So you've got to be a little bit careful with a simple system because because there's not that many strings. And if you pull one of the strings, a lot of things can collapse sort of thing. So you've got to be careful with homebrewing. But otherwise, just making monsters, it's a matter of paring it down to what the essence of the monster is, mostly. Yeah.
I agree. I found the same thing as I was looking at this and I was thinking, this is what I would want my monster to do, but ShadowDark needs you to take whatever you've got in your head, whatever you think the monster should be doing, and you need to pare it down to the most essential things.
Yeah.
Rather than having every little minute thing going on, which just makes the stat block huge.
Yeah.
So monster stat blocks generally are very small and simple. Not all of them. Big bosses, they're a page long. Okay. And that's a digest size page. Monster stat blocks are really easy to understand and run, I found. It's a shorthand format. Mm-hmm. So you have to understand the format. There's one page that explains to you how to run to understand the shorthand format, and that's actually not hard to understand. It's very, very simple.
Yeah, there's no challenge rating or any of that sort of structural stuff.
No,
Uh,
they do have a kind of a challenge rating. They're called monster levels.
well, yeah. That's a catch-all for your hit points, your hit dice, and how much damage you do and things like that, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
and what your attack modifier might be, and how many attacks your monster might do, because monsters get more than one attack depending on how high a level their monster is, unlike player characters who do not.
Yeah.
So each monster has one sentence that describes the monster. That's it. So she has to describe everything, because not every monster has a picture or illustration. What illustrations of monsters you do get that exist are in black and white, line drawing, hardcore horror, in my opinion. Illustrations of creatures have really that old school style with a mix of edgy modern danger, and I would describe as the Twilight Zone. There are a lot of monsters included in the core rule book. I think she's gone through and just used the SRD for 5e or Creative Commons document, and she's just made a version for ShadowDark of every single thing that's in there.
Yeah.
Every monster has at least one special ability or interesting combat ability outside of just making a bite, doing a claw thing, or swinging a weapon. So they all feel different in some way. And monsters don't appear to vary widely for their monster level. So if you get a level 1 monster and a different level 1 monster, when you look at them and compare them, their power does not feel widely disparaging. It doesn't feel like somebody's using a completely different system for those two monsters, even though they're the same monster level.
Yeah.
She's really stuck to her maths. The guidelines and tools for making your own new and homebrew monsters is pretty good. There's a monster generator table. There's a mutations table. There's plenty of ways to randomly create the monsters for ShadowDark. You don't even have to have an idea. You can just roll it up randomly. And she does this a lot with all of her Dungeon Master tools.
And they just included the modifiers and the abilities, not the numbers as well, I noticed.
Yeah. So even if you're looking at making the monster, she will give you a guideline in terms of, what does the monster roll to hit? Well, your monster can roll, if it's a level 1 monster, it's going to be a +1.
Yeah.
And if it's a level 4 monster, it could be anything from level a +1 to a +4, but it's not going to be more than +4.
Right.
If it's a level 10 monster, it could be anything from level 1. If it's a level 10 monster, it might be 1 through to 10. Any of those numbers in there.
Yeah. So it's like a bounded thing for the monsters too.
Yeah. And this is why it's going to be really easy for people to make their own monsters for ShadowDark.
Yeah.
Even though there are lots of monsters already in this book.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really useful tables and charts to help a dungeon master create their own stuff for their games. So if you want to make anything, she's got the tools in there to help you do that. She's got a downtime system between adventures. Downtime is a big issue for this game. Like you need to have downtime built into your adventure. Every time you complete an adventure, the players get to have downtime. So it's part of that game. There's plenty of magic items in the book. It doesn't dominate the book though. And there's tools to help you make magic items. So, you've got, it's a toolbox. It's probably, I use this ShadowDark book more than I use any of the Dungeon Master guides that I have now. When I'm making adventures, making anything outside of my own tables that I've created for myself, I use this book for creating stuff more than anything else.
It's just not walls of text. Everything is just intuitive to read. I guess because we've been looking at these type of role-playing books for years, and
we recognize it. Yeah, we recognize a nice to read book when we see one.
Yeah, and because everything is in shorthand, as well. Like I'm just looking at these monster stats now, and I could run one of these monsters within 2 seconds. Open it up. I struggle with that in 5e, like running on a random table and then getting a monster that I'm not familiar with, and then having to read its stat block and run it, especially if it's got spellcasting abilities as well on top of that.
Yeah.
Whereas this, I'm not feeling that.
As soon as you see a book, this is a good indicator. As soon as you see a book which has got internal referencing, like as Fred has mentioned multiple times, turn to page 28 to see more on this information. You know it's been edited and laid out well. You just know it. And ShadowDark is a perfect example of really effective editing, where it's not removing anything valuable. It's just making everything succinct. It's giving you the information with as less mentally taxing as possible. So it's presenting it like a nice, like you don't present your meal all on one plate dumped together with dessert and everything on the same thing. That's horrible. Nobody wants to eat that. You can, but it's not going to be pleasant. No, you want individual plates where you appreciate each thing for its own merit, and you can appreciate and you get the essence.
Just have a smoothie otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. You don't put everything in a blender. Morkborg is like a blended meal. Yeah. It's garish. The colors are all over the place. The flavors are blended together. They don't make a lot of sense with the visuals and stuff aren't indicative of what the section is about. Morkborg, on the other hand, is extremely approachable. It's not taxing to read. It's reference friendly. It's internally consistent. Oh, sorry. ShadowDark is consistent. It's well edited. It's succinct, and it's written by somebody who's accomplished designer of layout.
Orcs have only got 4 hit points. I was a bit surprised by that.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the system for determining what is a challenge for your players is explained. It initially, when you look at it, it's confusing. Okay. But she does warn you about using solo monsters on their own. She recommends that you don't do that. She recommends being careful about using more monsters in the group. And she explains how to build monsters that are a challenge. And if you work through the table and the explanation a couple of times, you can kind of figure it out. The only problem is if you have already written your adventure and you have preconceived ideas of what monsters you would want to have there, and you're trying to go backwards to figure out what level they should be to face those monsters right throughout the adventure, it can be more difficult. That's what I've discovered.
So the level lines up with the level of your players? Is that what that is their CR, how their CR system works?
No, it doesn't. No. What happens in this system is when you're building an encounter, it works. It's on page 193, and how many monsters do you get? So use the 1-to-1 monster table to determine what level a monster should be when there is, one of these are being faced. So if you're between 0 level and 3, an average for your party, so anything between 0 and 3, the maximum level of monster that they should really be facing to be a challenge is 1. Okay. Now, I've played around with this a little bit, and I've discovered that you can go up to 4 levels on a monster, and they're all right. Beyond that, and you start to run into trouble.
Yeah.
So you could probably ignore this table a little bit and say, I can throw a level 4 monster at first level characters, even 0 level characters, because I don't have to necessarily fight the thing. And then level 4 to 6, it's supposed to be 3rd level monsters is the top end. But again, I would push that by another 3 or 4, and you should be all right. And then 7 to 9 for the characters, then your level, the level's supposed to be 5. And then for 10th level characters, then it's supposed to be top end, it should be monsters of 7. But that doesn't make any sense because you only go up to 10, and there are monsters that have a higher level than 10. So there is room to adjust, because you're not always fighting the monster,
and you're not fighting them to the death.
Yeah, and she always recommends using more than one monster.
Yeah.
So rather than 1 orc, 2 orcs, or 3 orcs, or probably for a level 1 group, you're probably going to be facing 4 orcs if you've got a group of 4.
Yeah. Craven, cowardly, backstabbing orcs.
Yeah. So that's it. That's the.
Okay. All right. Look, we've hit the 2-hour mark already.
Yeah.
Jesus. Yeah, Fred wasn't lying. Okay. Anything else before do you want to get into the wrapping it up side of it?
Yeah, let's wrap it up.
Okay. So I did have a few questions here. Just your experiences with ShadowDark. Is there any sort of favorite moments you've had so far with the game?
All of them.
Yeah, I enjoyed it more than Beat Me. I can say that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So ShadowDark is now the game that I'll probably play with my group. For
it's the Beat Me killer. Let's call it that. It's a Beat Me killer.
Well, I think it's I feel like it's the.
Does Wally know that?
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
I've already talked to Wally about writing adventures for 5e and for ShadowDark, and he said yes, we should do that.
Yeah.
But no, the reality is I plan to run this probably for the next 3 months, and then after that we'll reevaluate to see how people feel, and then we'll probably play a bit of Super Atomic, and then we'll probably go back to ShadowDark, or somebody will run something else. But I suspect we might be playing ShadowDark for a while.
Yeah,
it is what I will probably wind up for the very first time dungeon mastering on YouTube, because nobody's ever seen me dungeon master on YouTube. ShadowDark is the game I will probably use in the foreseeable future. It is also the game system I want to make stuff for: monsters, classes, ancestries, magic items.
Yeah, we had an option recently with a writing group of mine that I'm a part of. We did the Through the Feywild and stuff like that, and we decided on next adventure, which next trilogy of books that we were going to do, which were Far Realm themed, but not mutant horror Far Realm. It's more like weird SCP sort of Far Realm stuff. And we decided to not use 5th edition because of the OGL thing, and just the disfavor and the boycott that everybody's kind of using on the company. They decided to use Pathfinder instead, and I bowed out because I don't want to read the Pathfinder rules. I don't want to write for it. I don't want to write for that game. It's just it's a fucking nightmare. But ShadowDark, it's just it's a breeze to write for.
Yeah.
Is there any campaign settings or stuff for ShadowDark?
Yeah,
anything like...
people have made campaign settings, basically level 1 to 10 adventures. They do exist.
Yeah.
They don't call them really campaign settings. They just say it's an adventure from level 1 to 10. That's a campaign.
No, but is there a world? Like, has someone created a world for ShadowDark?
No, she hasn't done that. You make your own worlds, because she literally gives you all the tools in the core book to make your own world. Like, if you want to make settlements and villages and NPCs, all that stuff is in there. Literally, the tools are there.
If you wanted to set it in the Forgotten Realms or in Ebron or in Dungeon World, whatever, you can do it.
That was my question. Yeah, so for someone like me and AJ that are balls deep in Forgotten Realms.
Oh yeah, I could easily run a Forgotten Realms adventure just with this rule system for sure, because the lore is not rules based. Yeah. I mean, it's handy. You would need to make a lot of homebrew character classes and stuff to represent the NPCs and stuff that are in the game settings that you have. But you could easily adapt those as well and say, instead of being a paladin of so and so, they're a priest of so and so. So.
But also too, you can go on the internet and you'll probably find that there's already a paladin for ShadowDark, because somebody's probably already made it.
A lot of the work has been done for you. I think more so than anything, what we need now is for the community to come together and have something like a drive-through RPG or something like that for ShadowDark, where we like D&D Beyond has got all of the homebrewed section. We need to make something like that independent of D&D Beyond 5th edition as well, because they can delete that at any time, and that's a horrible, horrible loss to our community that all of that work that we put into making those homebrew stuff could be deleted. We should never let one company own, the resources that we use.
Something like Mystara would probably lend itself in terms of like the character, because obviously that's Beckme's one.
Yeah.
And this is heavily.
Yeah. Mystara would be super easy.
Any challenges faced when transitioning to ShadowDark from other systems you found, Bruce?
Just that lack of nuance sometimes, having to adapt it to a simpler system. Where there's, in Forgotten Realms, some of the magic items and stuff are just far too complex, like artifacts and things like that aren't represented in ShadowDark. But story trumps rules most of the time in that regard. You can just narrate it instead of have rules. Like, you can just tell the players what it's doing, what its special abilities are, and say, is this something we need to write down in the character sheets? It's like, no, I'll keep track of this. You don't need to worry about the charges of the curses or the requirements of an artifact and stuff. You treat it like a monster, essentially.
There's a couple of challenges with ShadowDark, and they're partly to do with the way the rules are written and the lack of clarity or the lack of being granular. It's not a granular game. And the problems I've found is, one, unarmed attacks was one of them. Unarmed attacks, but also the rogue, or should I say the thief's backstab ability, because backstab requires stealth. And so how do you get backstab to work? Does backstab you work every single round they take a turn to make an attack, or does it only work once at the very beginning of the round? And what are the criteria for backstab to, because it's really kind of nebulous. So we're still trying to muck our way through that.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I think, backstab was a hassle that reared its head almost immediately when we were playing the game.
Yeah, for me, backstab is two things. One, it's surprise. It's a surprise attack when they're unaware that you're there. The other thing is when they are essentially in combat. When you're fighting an opponent who's within near range of you, you're concentrating on that opponent. Same sort of way that you should treat a spell concentration. And if an opponent is engaged with and has received attacks and is attacking another opponent, essentially your rogue character is not in there. If they're behind them or within something like that, then they should be able to get a sneak attack. But otherwise, like being able to hide in plain sight and things like that, and just having a sneak attack because they've got disadvantage for anything is kind of it's too easy to get a sneak attack in 5th edition.
Yeah. There's also the stealth rules, which we shouldn't be surprised, because every version of Dungeons and Dragons has struggled with having stealth rules or hiding mechanics that make sense. And as a general rule, as far as I can tell, and ShadowDark says that if you're in the middle of a fight, you cannot hide.
Yeah.
Which makes perfect sense. And it was always bullshit when it became a thing.
Yeah.
But there are still some areas where the Dungeon Master will find themselves trying to figure out what to do with regard to how to adjudicate stealth and hiding, and when people know that somebody's aware or not. There are rules around surprise and stuff like that. But it's probably not quite enough to get you where you need to be. There's also another weird thing that happens, and that's the zombie character, where if you drop to 0 hit points and the death timer starts, and that death timer keeps going, and then somebody comes up to you, but they don't heal you with magic or a potion. They stabilize you. Okay, that's fine. So now what happens in the rules is it says as soon as you're stabilized, you're no longer dying, so the death timer stops. But you're not on 1 hit point. You're still on 0 hit points, and you're unconscious. So how long are they unconscious before they are conscious again on 1 hit point? Because the rules don't actually say that as such. It's not clear. You as the game master would have to come up with a solution for that, because that is not spelled out. You could say that that's a problem with the system, or maybe that's a feature, but it's certainly a factor that will confuse a few people. There'll be questions.
I mean, it does represent a character that's in a coma.
It does.
Yeah.
So really, what I think it is trying to do is leave it to, and often I think there's a couple of sentences or a sentence in here where Kelsey says that if there isn't a rule for the system, then the Dungeon Master makes it up.
Yeah.
And that, unfortunately, that sentence isn't in neon lights, and people will forget.
That's the unwritten rule of every tabletop RPG, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. No rules system or adventure plan survives contact with the enemy, which is your players.
My biggest challenge would be getting characters off D&D Beyond and getting them to use physical character sheets.
But can I just say, it takes, believe it or not, it takes anywhere from 5 minutes to 15 minutes to make a character.
Yep. Very fast.
I sat down with my group, and some of them had their character done in less than 15 minutes.
Yep.
And they never played the system. They are smart, but I bet that if you get them to do character sheet creation and don't use D&D Beyond for this system, that you'll be done pretty quick.
Oh, we were fucked. So the other day, for example, I tried to get my players to level up, and somehow they had merged the 2014 rules into the 2024 rules on D&D Beyond, and it took us an hour and a half to mix it up because like they're all new players, and suddenly one of my players is starting to use weapon mastery, and I'm like, we're not using these rules, mate. Like, what are you talking about? I've got this new ability I can do, this attack with my dagger now, and I was like, no.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to stop in the middle of our game and pause, and like in the middle of combat and pause for 45 minutes to like go through, and I had to bring up everyone's character sheets and physically tidy them all up.
Wow.
So ended up being a mess.
So there's another solution. Because ShadowDark is built, your character's built by rolling randomly your attributes or ability scores, and rolling for your you pick your class, obviously, and you pick your ancestry, and you roll randomly to determine your character advancement, but you're also rolling randomly to determine your background. There's actually a character builder for ShadowDark already. And you can go in there and you can build a character in less than a minute. It'll take you probably less than 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Scroll and click, essentially.
Scroll and click. You select the things that you want, make your choices, you press the button, randomly generates everything else, and it's done. So if you thought that you're getting them off D&D Beyond and onto another system, well, that has already been solved because somebody built it for free. You don't have to pay for it. It's free. You don't have to pay a damn thing. And you've got it.
All right. Any tips for GMs or players diving into ShadowDark?
Literally that. Just dive into it.
I wouldn't worry too much about anything, frankly. I would just do the best you can with it, because you're going to discover a whole lot of things that you didn't discover before. And for those of you who are, terrified of playing Dungeons and Dragons because of the complexity of modern D&D,
none of us really understand it.
You'll be fine with this.
This is why our podcasts and YouTube channels exist. Because of that reason.
Yeah.
So I've seen a whole bunch of people who have introduced people who've never played tabletop role-playing games or Dungeons and Dragons to this game. And there's been a couple who have had a little bit of a struggle, but most of them have sort of taken to it like a duck to water. In terms of their reports from family members, mums and dads and kids and you name it. There's there's the bridge to actually entering Dungeons and Dragons through ShadowDark is where I want to go, because it is a much easier system to teach, and it has a brighter future in my belief. This is the game that 2024 should have been.
Yeah, pretty much.
It is the new, it's the Pick Me Killer. Simple and smart. I'm keep going back to that. Sorry.
Yeah, it's the natural evolution of the OSR into the modern. Yeah. So instead of trying to reject modernity and cleave to the past, this is accepting the classic design and the modern design and blending the two together because they work. It's a highly practical system.
Yeah. I actually think it'll probably mean that the onboarding of people to playing Dungeons and Dragons through ShadowDark is going to be easier for new people, completely new to the hobby, than it is for modern D&D, whatever, D&D 5e or 6e or whatever the hell.
There is an easier option, but I haven't invented it yet.
Yeah, it's coming, but yeah,
it's coming.
But yeah, this is going to grow much faster than Dungeons and Dragons official.
Yeah. This certainly is more approachable than D&D 2024.
Yeah, D&D is not. Yeah, I know 5th edition they say is a lot more simple, and it is a lot more simple compared to past editions. But yeah, it's still a complex game.
Yeah. ShadowDark is still a complex game compared to like a pamphlet of rules for Monopoly. ShadowDark is still a highly complex game, but as role-playing games are concerned, it's much more intuitive, and as you say, it's a much more approachable and easy to read system.
Yeah. Okay. Final question before we wrap it up. Who is ShadowDark for, and who wouldn't like it, maybe, and who would like it?
Okay.
I like crunchy systems and I like rules light systems. So I'm the best of both worlds sort of thing. Like I love Palladium, for instance, and Rifts. I find nothing wrong with the Rift system. So that's where I'm coming from. Pathfinder for me is too crunchy. It's too bloated. It's just all over the place. It's like too many feats to keep track of. If I can't have a basic overview of the system in my head, it doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
5th edition, too many subclasses and things like that, which aren't really necessary. They're not really defined very well, and things like that. It's too complicated, too complex in some regards. It's just unnecessary. And with ShadowDark, for instance, you're not going to find yourself spending all afternoon making a character and making a character backstory and getting really upset when that character dies. It's not very conducive to people who want to, people who are on the cusp of being a dungeon master. So they spend 15 minutes making their character and their backstory and all that sort of stuff, and then they want to share their backstory with somebody. It's just like, is this character currently in a campaign? And they're like, no.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you can't really impose that backstory on somebody who's making a campaign because you're taking away the DM's agency. ShadowDark doesn't do that. Yeah, you're not gonna pre-roll a character before you start playing the adventure, sort of thing. So yeah, it's not really for that. It's much more a practical game for people who just want to get into and play a dungeon crawl. But it's also adaptable to other things. But it does dungeon crawling very, very well.
Yeah.
So I've played crunchy systems and light systems as well. Everything from Fate through to Pathfinder 1st edition. I'm terrified of 2nd edition Pathfinder.
You should be.
And I still feel the pressure of 4E and 3.5 and fail to understand AD&D, and maybe before I die I will understand it, but I don't think that's likely.
Well, you got my books, mate, so please.
No, I use them all the time, mate. I use those books all the time.
I gave Fred my books because I have no affection for that edition at all.
I use them all the time for creating stuff, because I go back and look at everything. Who's going to like this? I think people completely new to the hobby, it is going to be so much easier for them to understand that they only have to sit down for 10, 15 minutes and their character's made. Or go online, use the online builder, and it's done in 30 seconds.
Yeah, so barriers of entry are removed, so you can play it for free. It's got a character builder.
Yep.
It's got a well-supported community.
Yes.
It's got a lot of people who are actively writing for the game, so it's got legs. This is going to carry on for years and years and years. A lot of Kickstarter games are just restricted to the people who back the Kickstarter. They don't carry on past that. They don't build a community. So, things like I think even Matt Colville's game is going to struggle in that regard because there's just not enough people playing it. ShadowDark, we have a lot of people playing it.
Imagine if ShadowDark came out during the pandemic when we were all in lockdown mode. Do you think that would have and could have killed D&D then?
No, again, look, Dungeons and Dragons is not going to get killed by one tabletop role-playing game. If it dies, it'll because Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast have done something so horrendously stupid with their business model and how they approach selling their product that they fuck it all up. Or every tiny little RPG just nibbles away at D&D until there's just not as many people playing the game that they can't financially operate the way that they do, because their pie has become smaller and smaller as 1,000 different RPGs that are so similar to D&D or something else have just chopped away at it.
Yeah. At this point, I think that if we actually manage to shut down Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast, like gone completely, so nobody is producing official Dungeons and Dragons products anymore, the hobby doesn't go away. The people who are playing Dungeons and Dragons doesn't go away. So Dungeons and Dragons is the dream of Rome, right? At the moment, it's a dystopian, tyrannical Caligula on the throne who is despicable, and we kind of hate Rome and we see it as the center of corruption. But that's not the dream of Rome. The dream of Dungeons and Dragons is still alive in us, right? We carry it. We are Dungeons and Dragons. Hasbro is not Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah. We are.
So back to who will like it. So new people, I think people who like rules light and don't want the high complexity are going to like this game. I think the number of dungeon masters running this game will expand far greater than any other version of D&D, Pathfinder and D included, doesn't matter what it is, just because it's so much easier to run and to make stuff for it. And I think it'll probably appeal to, now a lot of people have said it will not appeal to power gamers, optimizers, and min-maxers. And I would say yes to a certain degree. I'm sure there are going to be people who like complexity, like to know how to build characters from level 1 to 20 and think about all the number crunching, and they can't do this with this game. But I would also like to remind people that I have a home group, and Simon's a power gamer, John's a power gamer, JP's a power gamer, Cajun's a power gamer, Kirsty is the only one who's not a power gamer, and I'm capable of power gaming if I want to, out of my entire group. And they want to play this game, and they don't want to stop playing this game. So just because they're a power gamer or an optimizer doesn't mean they won't want to play this game.
Yeah. One thing, I've just had a look on their website, and one thing that's just stood out to me that I absolutely love, 5 mini adventure cards with the map. Just, how I like print my adventures, Fred? Yeah.
Yep.
Just a map with some key locations.
Yep. And they don't type out every single thing that happens in every single room like a railroad track, which is I like. It's like, here's the room. This is what's in it. Away you go.
Yeah. Well, 2.5 hours.
Can I just say, if any podcast needed to be more than 2 hours, ShadowDark is the one that needed to be.
Yeah, so for a rules-like game, we've got a lot to say about it, and that says a lot for the game itself. It's the word of mouth is, and the reputation of ShadowDark is well deserved. The community is very, very on board with it. It's well supported. We love it. You should play it. Get out there and roll some dice.
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Kelsey. You made a good one. I mean,
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, and also, I think it goes to show that I haven't played it, and I literally just read the quick start rules in one night, and I still managed to have a lot to talk about. Just based on a 2-hour read, I could sit here and I wasn't lost. I had point, I couldn't do that with D&D.
And can I just say, somewhat controversially, as the last little thing, just my last little thing, Kelsey, it does the narrative that anybody has that this hobby has got anything against women approaching, like, no, we reward people on their merit and what they do and their output. And Kelsey is a fantastic writer, a fantastic community leader, and she is whip crack smart. So it doesn't matter really. If you have those qualities, it doesn't matter where you come from, what ethnicity, what background, or whatever. This is a game. This is a hobby that is about mentality. It's about community and stuff like that. And if you have those attributes, you're rewarded and accepted, no matter where you are or where you come from. And it's always been that way.
I would like to second that as a white complexion 53-year-old man. That I'm so glad that it is a woman, and it was Kelsey who's done this.
Yes, thank God.
Yeah. I mean, this is, as a person that is currently running a game for a brand new group of players that have never played tabletop role-playing games before as well, this has addressed a lot of my frustrations and issues I'm currently having with this group as well. I can, like, a lot of things that I am bumping my head, like on Friday night, we played for 6.5 hours, like I said, because we were trying to fix things up or trying to explain rules. I wouldn't have had that. I wouldn't have had any of these issues if I was running ShadowDark. In hindsight is a wonderful thing, people.
Yeah. Hindsight is 2020.
Yeah. No, I'm always, I'm a very open-minded guy. Yeah, but no. I enjoyed that. It is currently sitting in my cart.
Did you buy the PDF and the physical copy?
Yeah, and I'm looking at getting the DM screen as well because GM screen, sorry, because I play in person and I have a thing for GM screens. I just need to go inside to get the credit card that my wife doesn't know about. Yeah. All right. Yeah. That was good. Anyone? Any closing thoughts or anything before we get out of here?
We've said it
2.5
all.
hours, I think.
We've said it all.
AJ's yawning. Fred's laxatives are probably about to kick in.
Yeah, that's right. I need to go to the
My
toilet.
wife is probably going to open the door and tap on her watch. So yeah, things are going on. All right. Well, yeah, thanks everyone. Yeah, Happy New Year. Yeah, check out ShadowDark. It's easy to find. Just Google ShadowDark and go directly to the website. Great community on there as well. Discord. Yeah, and yeah, if you're sitting on the fence, hopefully this has swayed you. Yeah. And yeah, good night from me.
And it's good night from him.
And it's good night from the darkness where the monsters lurk.
Fred worked on that one. He was like, I hope they say it this week. I've got something.
No, I made that shit up just on the spot, mate.
All right. Thanks, everyone.